"Do not fire," Director Benjamin Carter said quietly. "Lock every way out instead." Across the command deck at Johnson Space Center in Houston, every head turned toward him. The words hung in the room like they had been spoken too early or far too late. Outside the reinforced windows, dozens of massive displays tracked the largest extraterrestrial fleet humanity had ever seen. 47 alien warships drifted into lunar orbit with the confidence of people arriving at an empty vacation home. Their engines glowed a cold blue against the black sky while sleek landing craft peeled away from the formation and descended toward the moon's southern hemisphere. Every major news network on Earth carried the invasion live. Families paused dinner. Office workers gathered around televisions. Kids who had dreamed of astronauts watched in stunned silence as strange ships crossed above the same moon they had looked at their entire lives. On board the alien flagship, Supreme Fleet Commander Cale Voss stood with his hands clasped behind his back, watching Earth rise over the gray horizon through an enormous observation window. The blue planet looked peaceful, fragile. His tactical officer smiled. "Their orbital defenses remain inactive, sir." Cale barely reacted. As predicted, another officer glanced at the latest intelligence reports. No military formations detected on the surface. Mining stations only. Research facilities. Civilian personnel. Cale allowed himself a small smile. Humanity spent generations pretending this rock mattered. It is nothing but an oversized quarry. Soft laughter spread across the bridge. Someone joked about how long the occupation paperwork would take. Another guessed they would be back home before the next rotation cycle. Cale looked toward Earth one more time before speaking into the fleet-wide communication channel. "Proceed with Phase 1. Secure every installation. Minimize unnecessary confrontation. We are taking territory, not making history." Hundreds of landing thrusters ignited at once, scattering silver dust across the ancient craters. Meanwhile, 238,000 miles away, Benjamin Carter folded his reading glasses and slipped them into his jacket pocket. He did not raise his voice. He did not pound the table. He simply watched as one red marker after another appeared across the moon. Around him, analysts waited for the order everyone expected. Scramble interceptors. Activate orbital cannons. Send Marines. Instead, Carter looked toward Colonel Grace Holloway. "Has every outbound vector been mapped?" "Yes, sir." "Close them." Grace hesitated for half a second. "Every one of them." Carter nodded once. "Nobody leaves." The room fell silent. One young analyst finally found the courage to speak. "Sir, if we are not defending the bases..." Carter looked at the young man with tired eyes that had seen too many classified briefings over too many years. "We are." The analyst frowned. "I do not understand." Carter looked back at the screen where the first alien transports were touching down. "Neither do they." Far above the lunar surface, Cale Voss watched green confirmation lights fill his tactical display. Landing Zone Alpha secured. Landing Zone Bravo secured. Mining Complex 7 occupied without resistance. Communications Hub 3 captured intact. Every report sounded almost disappointingly easy. His executive officer chuckled. Humans always were better diplomats than soldiers. Cale nodded. Confidence without strength eventually becomes surrender. He reached for a cup of steaming black tea prepared according to scanned human customs. Transmit the victory bulletin. Inform the Dominion Senate that Earth's moon has been secured ahead of schedule. The encrypted message left the flagship at the exact same moment Earth's hidden defense network silently changed status. Deep beneath layers of lunar rock, systems that had slept for decades awakened without alarms, without speeches, without celebration. Thick blast doors unlocked. Ancient reactors began humming to life. Thousands of unseen sensors opened their mechanical eyes. No warning was transmitted. No declaration of war was issued. Humanity answered with silence. And somewhere beneath the dust, something older than every research station on the moon quietly realized it finally had visitors. Dr. Olivia Brooks had spent 8 years living beneath the moon, and most days felt almost painfully ordinary. She started every morning with terrible coffee, checked the oxygen recycling reports before sunrise over Shackleton Crater, and called her 11-year-old daughter Emma in Colorado whenever their schedules lined up. Emma always asked the same question. "When are you coming home?" Olivia always gave the same answer. "Soon, sweetheart. I promise." It was a promise that became harder to believe with every passing year. The Artemis Research Complex looked exactly like the public videos released back on Earth. Bright laboratories, geological surveys, mining equipment, scientists collecting rock samples. Tour videos loved showing smiling engineers explaining lunar ice extraction and helium-3 production. Olivia had recorded a few of those videos herself. They never lied. They simply never showed everything. As the emergency sirens echoed through the underground corridors, dozens of researchers hurried toward the central command room, carrying tablets, sample cases, and half-finished cups of coffee. Nobody screamed. Nobody pushed. Years of emergency drills had made calm feel automatic. Olivia reached the operations console, where Chief Engineer Michael Donovan was already studying a wall of security feeds. The 63-year-old engineer barely looked up. Morning got interesting. Olivia forced a nervous smile. You always did have a strange definition of interesting. Every monitor displayed the same impossible sight. Alien landing craft touching down one after another across the surface. Cargo elevators, solar farms, communications towers. Every installation humanity had openly admitted building on the moon was being occupied one by one. Yet no one was fighting back. Olivia stared at the screen in disbelief. Where is security? Michael shrugged. Following orders. What orders? Before he could answer, the overhead speakers crackled to life. Attention, all civilian personnel. Maintain your assigned sectors. Continue emergency continuity procedures. This is not an evacuation. A young geologist named Daniel Foster looked around the room in confusion. Not an evacuation? They are landing everywhere. Nobody answered him. A few minutes later, heavy footsteps echoed through the outer access tunnel. The blast doors slowly rolled open. Four alien soldiers entered the operations center wearing polished environmental armor that reflected the overhead lights. Their commander removed his helmet, revealing smooth silver skin and calm yellow eyes. He looked around the room almost casually before speaking through a translator. By authority of the Krylos Dominion, this facility is now under temporary occupation. Cooperate, and your daily lives will continue uninterrupted. Olivia exchanged a glance with Michael. The commander sounded less like a conqueror and more like someone checking into a hotel. Michael quietly folded his reading glasses and slipped them into his shirt pocket. Guess they really think this place is a mine. The alien commander noticed the comment. Did you say something? Michael smiled politely. Just talking to myself. The commander walked farther into the room, studying walls covered with geological maps and drilling schedules. Everything matched the intelligence his fleet had gathered. Research, mining, energy production. Nothing looked remotely military. He turned back toward Olivia. You are the facility director? Research director, she answered. Dr. Olivia Brooks. Excellent. Then you will assist us in transferring operational control. Olivia hesitated before nodding. She knew resisting would accomplish nothing. Still, something about Michael's expression bothered her. He looked almost relaxed, as if today's invasion had interrupted his schedule but not his expectations. After the commander walked away to inspect another laboratory, Olivia stepped closer and lowered her voice. Michael, why are you acting like this is normal? The old engineer looked at her for several long seconds before quietly asking a question of his own. Olivia, in 8 years down here, have you ever wondered why they only let us work above level 7? She frowned. Level 7? There is no level 7 on any station blueprint. Michael gave a tired little smile. Exactly. Commander Kale Voss walked through Artemis Research Complex with the quiet confidence of someone inspecting property he already believed belonged to him. Every corridor matched the intelligence reports. Laboratories, storage bays, water recycling systems, compact living quarters built for long rotations away from Earth. Nothing suggested hidden defenses. Nothing justified the caution some of his younger officers still carried. His deputy, Commander Selak, studied another tablet filled with fresh reconnaissance reports. Every public installation has been secured. No organized resistance anywhere on the surface. Kale nodded. Exactly as predicted. Selak looked almost disappointed. I expected more from humanity. Kale smiled faintly. Humans have always relied on reputation more than capability. They tell stories about resilience because they lack superiority. Back in Houston, Benjamin Carter listened to the same battlefield updates arriving through encrypted channels. Colonel Grace Holloway stood beside him holding a digital map that was slowly turning green. Surface occupation is nearly complete, she reported. They have entered every facility we intentionally left visible. Carter leaned back in his chair. And the civilian transfers? Completed 30 minutes ago. They never noticed. Grace paused before asking the question that had been bothering everyone. Sir, are we really letting them believe they have already won? Carter looked toward the enormous lunar display. No. He reached for a folder that had never existed inside any public government archive. We are letting them finish walking through the front door. Thousands of miles away, Olivia followed the alien commander through another section of the complex while technicians quietly complied with routine inspection requests. She expected panic. Instead, she found researchers discussing oxygen output, power consumption, and equipment maintenance as though another ordinary workday had simply become slightly more crowded. Daniel Foster leaned closer to Olivia while pretending to organize geological samples. Why is everyone so calm? He whispered. I honestly do not know anymore, Olivia admitted. Michael Donovan overheard them without looking up from his workstation. You both are asking the wrong question. Olivia frowned. Then what is the right question? Michael placed one hand against the steel wall beside him. Ask why this place was designed to survive problems that should never happen. Before Olivia could respond, the overhead lights dimmed for less than 1 second. Barely anyone noticed. The alien commander certainly did not. He continued reviewing station records while his engineers connected portable scanners to the facility network. One technician frowned at his display. Commander, these systems are unusually isolated. Meaning, most research stations connect directly to their planetary infrastructure. The technician tapped his screen again. This one does not. Every network stops here. Cale barely glanced over. Primitive engineering. Humans enjoy inefficient designs. The technician accepted the explanation, although his expression suggested he was not completely convinced. A few moments later, another report arrived from lunar orbit. Commander, all communications relays are functioning normally inside the operational zone. Excellent. However, Cale raised an eyebrow. However what? Long-range transmissions beyond lunar space are taking longer than expected. Interference? Possibly. Cale dismissed the concern with a wave of his hand. The moon contains unusual mineral deposits. Electromagnetic distortion is common. Nobody argued. After all, every invasion experienced minor technical inconveniences. Meanwhile, hundreds of feet beneath Olivia's boots, behind walls no blueprint acknowledged, silent machines continued waking one after another. Ancient servers began exchanging encrypted handshakes. Massive generators increased output by tiny fractions that escaped every alien sensor. Long-forgotten corridors filled with soft white light for the first time in decades. No alarms sounded. No dramatic countdown appeared. Everything happened with almost unsettling patience. Michael quietly glanced at his old mechanical wristwatch before smiling to himself. Olivia caught the expression. You know something? He nodded once. I know they have made the same mistake everyone makes. Which is? Michael looked toward the ceiling where the alien commander continued believing he controlled the facility. They think they invaded a research station. He gently tapped the floor with one finger. They still have not realized they are standing on the roof. Olivia could not let Michael's last sentence go. The words echoed in her mind as the alien inspection continued through another wing of the complex. Standing on the roof. It sounded ridiculous, yet nothing about the last hour had followed common sense. She had spent nearly a decade believing she knew every corridor inside Artemis Research Complex. She had memorized maintenance schedules, emergency routes, even the locations of every backup oxygen valve. Yet now she realized there were entire sections of the facility she had never questioned because access had always been denied under the same explanation. Restricted engineering infrastructure. Need to know authorization. National security. She had accepted those answers because everyone else had. Commander Cale Voss, meanwhile, had grown even more confident. He stood before a large holographic map assembled from the captured station servers. Colored markers represented every known human installation scattered across the lunar surface. Mining operations, research domes, communication arrays, solar farms. Every objective displayed a reassuring green status indicator. Selak folded his arms with satisfaction. Complete operational control achieved in less than 3 hours. Kale nodded. Send another report to the Dominion Senate. Inform them Phase 1 exceeded expectations. Should we begin resource extraction planning? Immediately. Humanity invested heavily here. We may as well profit from their work. The officers around him quietly agreed. To them, the operation had become administrative rather than military. They discussed shipping schedules, engineering surveys, and future occupation offices as though victory had already become routine paperwork. At the same time, Houston remained strangely calm. Colonel Grace Holloway reviewed another encrypted update before placing the tablet beside Benjamin Carter. They have started inventorying the public facilities. Carter looked almost amused. Good. Grace studied him carefully. They are making themselves comfortable. Carter answered without taking his eyes off the moon. People always unpack before they realize they booked the wrong house. Across the complex, an unfamiliar tone sounded through the ceiling speakers. It lasted less than 2 seconds before disappearing again. The alien soldiers barely acknowledged it. One technician glanced upward. Power fluctuation? Another checked his scanner. Everything reads normal. Michael quietly returned to organizing maintenance logs as if nothing had happened. Olivia noticed him smile again. That sound meant something. Michael looked at her with the patience of a grandfather explaining the obvious. Did you notice what did not happen? No alarms. Exactly. He lowered his voice. Real emergency systems do not announce themselves to visitors. Before Olivia could ask another question, the floor beneath them vibrated so gently she first assumed it was construction equipment somewhere in the mining tunnels. Coffee inside a nearby mug formed tiny ripples. A hanging wrench rotated slightly on its hook. Then everything became still again. One of the alien engineers frowned at his portable scanner. Commander, I detected a brief energy surge. Kale looked over. Source. Unknown. It originated below our mapped infrastructure. Geothermal? Another officer suggested. Possibly. The readings disappeared before anyone could investigate further. Kale dismissed the report with a shrug. The moon is full of abandoned excavation systems. Ignore it. His officers immediately moved on to more important discussions. Olivia watched them leave and felt an uneasy knot forming in her stomach. They were standing inside a place they believed they understood, making decisions based entirely on maps provided by humanity. Maps that suddenly seemed incomplete. Michael walked beside her toward a service elevator that had always been marked permanently out of order. Today, for the first time in 8 years, a small green light appeared above the sealed doors. Olivia stopped walking. That elevator has never worked. Michael pressed his old employee badge against the reader. A soft chime echoed through the hallway, and enormous locking mechanisms deep inside the wall slowly disengaged. He looked at Olivia and smiled with quiet confidence. That is because until today, nobody downstairs needed us. The elevator doors opened without a sound. Olivia expected another maintenance level, maybe an older engineering deck that had been sealed years ago. Instead, she stepped into a corridor unlike anything she had ever seen. The walls were not painted white like the research complex above. They were built from dark alloy panels with almost no visible seams. The lighting was soft and indirect, reflecting off polished floors that looked untouched despite their age. The air even smelled different. Cleaner. Colder. Michael walked forward as though he had done this hundreds of times. Olivia hurried beside him. How long has this been here? He answered without slowing down. Long before either of us took our first breath. She stared at him. You cannot be serious. I have never been more serious. Behind them, the elevator doors quietly closed, leaving the familiar research station somewhere far above. As they continued, discrete cameras followed their movement. Small status lights switched from amber to green one after another. Somewhere beyond the walls, systems were recognizing authorized personnel returning after years of silence. Halfway down the corridor, they reached another security checkpoint. There were no keypads. No scanners. A calm female voice filled the hallway. Identity confirmed. Chief Engineer Michael Donovan. Civilian Director Olivia Brooks. Welcome back. Olivia stopped walking. Welcome back. Michael smiled. Technically, this is your first visit. Before she could process that sentence, an enormous blast door slid sideways with surprising grace. Beyond it stretched a chamber so large that the far wall disappeared into the distance. Elevated walkways crossed above massive cylindrical reactors. Hundreds of robotic maintenance units moved methodically between equipment that hummed with quiet precision. There were no crowds, no panic, only disciplined purpose. Men and women wearing simple gray work uniforms looked up briefly before returning to their tasks. One older technician waved at Michael. About time they showed up. Michael waved back. Traffic was a little heavier than usual. Olivia turned slowly, trying to absorb the impossible scale surrounding her. This cannot fit inside the moon. Michael looked at her. Exactly. At nearly the same moment, Commander Cale Voss received his first report that refused to make sense. A communications officer stepped onto the bridge of the flagship holding a tablet with obvious concern. Commander, long-range transmissions have stopped. Cale looked up from his strategic display. Equipment failure? We tested 3 independent systems. Results. Every signal reaches lunar orbit. The officer hesitated. Nothing leaves it. Selak frowned. Interference from Earth? Negative. The transmissions simply disappear. Cale walked toward the main display himself. Attempt direct quantum relay. Seconds passed. Another technician looked up. No response. Emergency beacon. Also blocked. Cale remained calm, although the confidence in his voice softened slightly. Launch a courier drone. Minutes later, another report arrived. Commander, the drone completed launch sequence. And it never crossed the outer perimeter. Silence settled across the bridge. No explosion. No collision warning. The drone had simply vanished from every sensor the moment it reached a specific distance from the moon. Back in Houston, Colonel Grace Holloway looked toward Benjamin Carter as another encrypted confirmation appeared across her screen. Outbound containment is complete. Carter slowly stood and buttoned his jacket. Good. Grace took a slow breath. Every exit? Carter nodded once. Every single one. She looked at the image of the moon suspended above the operations table. Do they know? Carter allowed himself the smallest hint of a smile. Not yet. Deep below the lunar surface, Olivia stood on a balcony overlooking the enormous hidden complex, while countless indicator lights quietly shifted from standby blue to active white. She finally understood why nobody upstairs had panicked when the invasion began. They had never been defending the research station. They had only been waiting for every visitor to step inside before someone gently closed the only door leading back out. Olivia followed Michael across one of the elevated walkways while trying to make sense of the impossible world hidden beneath the moon. Engineers moved with quiet confidence, exchanging short greetings as if this underground city had simply started another ordinary shift. Nobody looked surprised that an alien fleet had arrived above them. Nobody even seemed hurried. One young technician walked past carrying a toolbox and smiled politely. Morning, Chief. Michael nodded. Morning, Eric. Everything online. 98%. The last reactor synchronization finishes in 4 minutes. Olivia stopped. 98% of what? Michael rested both hands on the railing overlooking the vast chamber below. The system. What system? He looked at her for a long moment before answering. The one your generation was never supposed to know existed. He led her toward a circular briefing room where an enormous holographic model slowly rotated above a polished metal table. Olivia immediately recognized the moon, but something was wrong. Layer after layer peeled away from the image until only a complex network remained inside. Thousands of tunnels, massive structural supports, hidden energy grids, entire districts that did not exist on any civilian blueprint. Her mouth slowly fell open. This cannot be real. Michael quietly folded his arms. Every public map was accurate. Olivia looked back at him. Then why does none of this appear? Because everything you saw was built on top of this. Before she could respond, another man entered the room wearing a plain Navy uniform with no visible rank insignia. His hair had turned silver years ago, and his calm expression reminded Olivia of Benjamin Carter whenever he appeared on televised congressional hearings. Dr. Brooks, the man said warmly. I am Admiral Nathan Collins. Welcome to Lunar Command. Olivia shook his hand automatically. Admiral, Collins smiled. Retired. Officially, anyway. He gestured toward the hologram. You deserve some answers. The rotating image zoomed inward until the underground structure filled the room. Collins spoke with the relaxed tone of a history professor rather than a military officer. When humanity first established permanent settlements here, people assumed we were building research stations. He paused. We encouraged that assumption. Another layer appeared, revealing enormous circular chambers connected by reinforced transit corridors stretching for miles beneath the surface. Collins continued. Every laboratory, every mining operation, every solar array was designed to support one larger project. Olivia stared at the display. Which was? Collins looked directly at her. Turning the moon itself into Earth's first fully integrated defensive fortress. She took a slow breath, trying to process what she had just heard. All these years, the scientists were conducting real research, Collins answered. The miners really extracted resources. The engineers really built habitats. Nothing was fake. He smiled gently. You simply never saw the complete picture. High above them, Commander Cale Voss stood on the observation deck of his flagship watching another failed communications attempt scroll across his display. His patience was beginning to wear thin. Status. The communications officer swallowed. No outbound transmissions have reached Dominion space. Navigation satellites beyond lunar orbit are also unavailable. Selak frowned. Unavailable or destroyed? Neither. They simply no longer respond. Cale looked toward Earth hanging peacefully beyond the moon. Prepare the fleet for departure. We will report in person if necessary. Minutes later, another officer hurried onto the bridge carrying fresh telemetry. Commander, our jump calculations cannot establish a stable corridor. Run them again. We already have. Every route terminates at the same invisible boundary. Cale remained silent. For the first time since entering lunar orbit, he looked less like a conqueror and more like a commander searching for information that should have been obvious. Deep beneath his feet, Admiral Collins watched the holographic moon complete one final rotation before gently touching the table. Every hidden defense grid illuminated at once, forming an intricate web beneath the surface. Olivia could only whisper one question. How long has humanity been building this? Collins smiled with quiet pride. Long enough that most people stopped asking why we kept returning to the moon. They thought we were building bases. He looked toward the ceiling, where 47 alien warships still believed they controlled the battlefield. We were building the battlefield itself. Commander Cale Voss refused to believe in invisible walls. Every military academy in the Dominion taught the same principle. If something blocked your advance, you measured it, analyzed it, and broke through it. He stood in the center of the flagship bridge with his hands behind his back, watching another navigation solution collapse into meaningless data. Run the calculations again, he said calmly. Use every available reference point. The navigation officer nodded immediately. Minutes passed in uneasy silence before he looked up once more. Same result, Commander. Every projected course returns to lunar orbit. Selak stepped toward the tactical display. What if we simply move farther away using conventional engines? Cale answered before anyone else could. Do it. Across the fleet, enormous engines quietly increased output. On every bridge, officers expected the familiar sensation of gradual acceleration. Instead, something deeply unsettling happened. Distance markers refused to change. External cameras showed stars drifting exactly as expected, yet every independent instrument insisted the ships remained inside the same operational sphere around the moon. One captain reported faulty sensors. Another ordered a complete system reboot. A third demanded replacement navigation computers. Every report ended exactly the same way. They were moving. They simply were not leaving. Deep beneath the surface, Olivia stood beside Admiral Nathan Collins inside Lunar Command, while large displays updated every few seconds. She watched dozens of blue icons representing the alien fleet circle the moon in slow, predictable patterns. They think their instruments are malfunctioning, she said quietly. Collins nodded. That is usually the first assumption. And the second? Michael Donovan answered with a tired smile. That someone else is making the instruments malfunction. Olivia folded her arms. When do they realize the truth? Collins looked toward the giant display. Usually when every reasonable explanation disappears. At that exact moment, another report arrived on Cale's flagship. Commander, boarding teams are requesting updated extraction schedules. Tell them to prepare for departure. The communications officer hesitated. Sir, they are asking where they should depart to. Cale frowned. What kind of question is that? Their local navigation systems no longer agree with orbital command. Every surface unit believes it is receiving different coordinates. Selak walked to another console. Synchronize every clock in the fleet. The technicians obeyed immediately. Seconds later, confusion spread across the bridge. Some systems reported only a few seconds of drift. Others differed by nearly 4 minutes. Nothing catastrophic. Just enough to make precise coordination increasingly unreliable. Kale slowly exhaled. Interesting. It was the first honest word of curiosity he had spoken since arriving. Back in Houston, Benjamin Carter accepted a fresh cup of coffee from a young operations specialist who looked far too nervous for someone holding a simple paper cup. "Thank you," Carter said warmly. The specialist glanced toward the lunar display. "Sir, they keep trying the same escape patterns." Carter smiled gently. "People trust habits. Especially successful people." Colonel Grace Holloway looked at the latest telemetry. Phase 3 is complete. Carter took one slow sip before setting the cup down. "Good. Keep everything quiet." "No warning?" she asked. "No speeches." Carter shook his head. "If they have not figured it out by now, another conversation will not help." Far below the lunar surface, Olivia watched another section of the holographic fortress illuminate. Transit corridors shifted. Security doors quietly sealed. Autonomous maintenance systems rerouted themselves without a single alarm. Nothing felt aggressive. Everything felt deliberate. Michael placed one hand on the edge of the table. "You know what surprises most people?" Olivia looked at him. "What?" He smiled. "They expect humanity to build bigger weapons." He gently tapped the glowing model of the moon. "Instead, we built a place where losing your way becomes the first battle you cannot win." High above them, Commander Cale Voss stared through the observation window at the silent gray world beneath his fleet. For the first time since the operation began, the moon no longer looked empty. It looked patient. 3 weeks passed, and the silence became impossible to explain. The Dominion Senate expected victory reports, resource inventories, and occupation updates. Instead, every scheduled transmission window came and went without a single verified message from Commander Cale Voss or his fleet. At first, officials blamed equipment failures. Then they suspected solar interference. By the second week, long-range reconnaissance probes were dispatched toward the Sol system. None of them returned usable data. On Earth, life continued with almost unsettling normality. Baseball games filled stadiums. Morning traffic crawled through Los Angeles. Families gathered around backyard grills on warm Saturday afternoons. News outlets reported only that international space operations remained restricted for security reasons. Benjamin Carter insisted on keeping it that way. "There is no reason to frighten people," he told a cabinet briefing. "The situation is contained." Colonel Grace Holloway looked across the conference table. "Contained is an interesting choice of words." Carter quietly smiled. Accurate ones usually are. Deep beneath the moon, Olivia Brooks had stopped feeling like a visitor. Every day she learned another piece of the enormous system hidden beneath the surface. She watched engineers maintain reactors older than her parents. She met programmers whose entire careers had been spent designing defensive systems nobody outside Lunar Command even knew existed. The most surprising part was how ordinary everyone seemed. They joked over coffee. They argued about maintenance schedules. Someone complained that the cafeteria still overcooked the eggs. It felt less like a secret military fortress and more like a small American town that happened to exist under 200 feet of lunar rock. One afternoon, Olivia found Admiral Nathan Collins standing alone before the massive observation display. Blue icons representing the alien fleet remained suspended in nearly the same positions they had occupied days earlier. "They stopped trying to leave," she said quietly. Collins nodded. "No," he looked at the display. "They stopped believing they could." Far above them, Commander Cale Voss sat alone inside his ready room. His uniform remained perfectly pressed. His desk remained organized. His discipline had never failed him, but certainly had. Every report arriving from his officers carried another mystery, with no satisfying explanation. Navigation remained impossible. Long-range communication remained blocked. Supply projections grew increasingly complicated because nothing functioned according to normal strategic assumptions. Selak entered carrying a data tablet. "Commander." Cale looked up. "Anything?" Selak slowly shook his head. No response from Dominion space. He hesitated before adding, "The crews are beginning to ask questions." Kale stood and walked toward the window, overlooking the gray horizon. "Questions are healthy. They are no longer asking about the mission." Selak paused. "They are asking whether anyone even knows where we are." Kale remained silent for several seconds. Finally, he reached toward the communications console built into his desk. "Open a general recording channel." The indicator light turned green. He looked directly into the camera. There was no fear in his face, only honesty. "This is Supreme Fleet Commander Kale Voss of the Krylos Dominion. If this transmission reaches anyone beyond lunar orbit, do not commit additional forces to this sector until you understand what has happened here. Our intelligence was incomplete. Humanity did not defend this place in the way we expected." He paused, searching for words that sounded almost impossible coming from a commander who had never admitted uncertainty before. "We believed we entered an occupied moon." He looked once toward the silent gray world filling the window behind him. "We entered something entirely different." He transmitted the recording anyway, fully aware that every previous message had disappeared without a trace. Deep below, one small indicator blinked on a quiet console inside Lunar Command. An operator glanced toward Admiral Collins. "Another outbound message intercepted, sir." Collins looked at the file for only a moment before nodding. "Archive it." Olivia frowned. "You are not going to answer?" Collins gently shook his head. "No, why?" He looked toward the ceiling with calm, thoughtful eyes. "Because sometimes the loudest message humanity can send is silence." 1 year later, the story had changed depending on who told it. On Earth, very few people even knew how close history had come to taking a different path. Schoolchildren still built model rockets. Families still gathered in backyards to watch the full moon rise over quiet neighborhoods. Couples still pointed toward the familiar silver circle hanging above the horizon without realizing how much trust rested inside that simple view. Deep beneath the surface, Lunar Command continued operating exactly as it always had. The reactors hummed. Engineers repaired equipment. Scientists continued research that would someday benefit millions of ordinary people who would never learn where those discoveries truly began. Olivia Brooks eventually returned to Colorado. Walking through the front door of her house felt stranger than stepping into the hidden fortress beneath the moon. Emma ran across the living room and wrapped both arms around her mother. Olivia held her daughter a little longer than usual. That evening they sat together on the back porch wrapped in blankets as autumn air drifted across the yard. Emma looked up at the bright moon. "Did you miss it?" she asked. Olivia smiled softly. "Sometimes. Do you ever want to go back?" Olivia thought about Michael Donovan drinking terrible coffee before another shift. She thought about Admiral Nathan Collins calmly explaining decades of quiet preparation. She thought about Benjamin Carter refusing to celebrate because protecting people had never been about applause. "Yes," she answered honestly. "Because there are good people there." Emma leaned against her shoulder. "Is it scary?" Olivia looked at the moon for a long moment before quietly shaking her head. "No, sweetheart." "Why not?" Olivia smiled. "Because the people up there never forgot what they were protecting." Across the country, Benjamin Carter officially retired from public service. Reporters asked him what he considered the greatest accomplishment of his career. They expected him to mention treaties, budgets, or international partnerships. Carter simply smiled and answered, "The best days are the ones nobody remembers because nothing terrible happened." Most people assumed he meant disaster preparedness. He never corrected them. Years passed. New governments rose. New civilizations entered the growing community surrounding Earth. Military academies across known space quietly updated their strategic textbooks. A new chapter appeared in every advanced command course. It contained only one sentence beneath a photograph of Earth's moon. Never mistake a peaceful frontier for an undefended one. Commander Kale Voss's final recorded message remained locked inside secure archives, heard only by a handful of senior leaders who understood its meaning. It was never broadcast across the galaxy. It did not need to be. Some lessons become stronger when carried as whispers instead of headlines. On clear nights, Olivia and Emma still looked toward the moon together. Emma was older now, asking bigger questions about the future, about science, about whether humanity would someday explore even farther than Mars. Olivia always encouraged those dreams. Curiosity, she believed, had built everything worth protecting. One evening Emma asked the same question children have asked for generations. What is really up there? Olivia smiled, remembering the first time the hidden elevator doors had opened beneath her feet. Hope, she answered. Emma laughed. That sounds like something from one of your science books. Olivia gently shook her head. No. Hope is what people build when they care enough to protect strangers they will never meet. The moon continued its quiet journey around Earth exactly as it had for billions of years, asking for no recognition and offering no explanation. To almost everyone, it remained a beautiful light in the night sky. But for the few who knew its secret, it stood as a simple reminder that real strength rarely announces itself. Real courage does not need an audience. And the safest future is often built by ordinary people doing extraordinary work long before anyone realizes why it matters.